How did you find out your SO was cheating on you? Story 1. Damn, my 5-year-old grandson told me about this. He said, "You are not my favorite grandfather, Rodney." I asked, "Who is Rodney?" The rest is history. Story 2. My best friend had chlamydia, which she picked up after an accidental relationship. And strangely, my then fiancé began to show symptoms of, coincidentally, chlamydia. I just got out of the hospital after spinal surgery, so luckily I didn't get infected. I took him to the clinic, he couldn't go on his own, and left him there. Story 3. In a strange way, my ex-girlfriend, A, told me about this. She messaged me and asked if I was still dating my current girlfriend, L. I answered yes. Then A sent me a photo of L dancing on some guy's lap at a party. I later found out that she did it for heroin. Story 4. We lived within hours of each other for several months due to work. I visited her every week on weekends. One day she called and said she needed to go see her dad or something for the weekend. I knew she was very busy and stressed at work, and she loved wildflowers. I spent Sunday picking wildflowers, bought a vase, and drove to the house she was renting to leave them on the porch for her to see when she got home that night. Her car was there. A sports motorcycle was parked next to her, and she was never quiet in bed when she didn't have to be. Story 5. Her best friend called me and told me. She was very careful, knowing how much it hurt. She gradually led me to this, provided evidence, and wished me a good evening. After we finished talking, I called my then-girlfriend and told her what happened. It was nice to have a counter-argument to every excuse or lie she tried to come up with. Being prepared probably saved me from just going back to her. Story 6. I caught one of my exes in my 20s in much the same way. My friend called me and asked, "Hey, are you still with her?" "But why?" "I'll text you a photo. I'm here right now, sorry, buddy." It was a photo of her sitting on some guy's lap at a party and kissing him. I drove to that house, parked outside, sent her a photo, and then went inside. He approached her, said that we were breaking up, looked at the guy and said, "Congratulations, now she is yours." To which he, completely unaware that she had a boyfriend, shouted at her. She left. He and I got drunk together at that party and became good friends for 5 years until he moved to the other side of the country. That night, she threw eggs at my house. It was all caught on camera, and she was charged with property damage. A couple of weeks later, after the property damage trial, her older brother slashed my tires. And 6 months later, she became pregnant by a guy who was on parole. Karma took its toll on her. Story 7. She was playing Fallout, New Vegas, and asked me to read a message that came on her phone. It said, "Had a great time today. Be sure to let me know the next time your boyfriend isn't home." This helped me finally decide not to propose to her. She never confessed, but he eventually texted me to let me know that this had been going on for 1.5 years. Story 8. We found out my dad was cheating on my mom when my 15-year-old sister's friend messaged her asking if she was with him. When she said no, the friend sent a photo of him sitting across from another woman at a local restaurant and kissing her. Like a fool, he still tried to deny it. Story 9. I found a long, burgundy-colored hair in his beard. I have short blonde hair. It's funny that before this he constantly accused me of cheating. Story 10. I unexpectedly returned home from work for lunch. He and his heavily pregnant lover were sitting on our sofa. Story 11. One evening, my now ex-girlfriend and I were smoking weed together while we were both off work. We were sitting in my room, and when she got up to fill her phone fell off the bed. I picked it up from the floor to give it to her, and at that moment, I received a message from the number on my phone that said, "You left your sweater at my place last night, cutie." Chaos ensued, of course. Story 12. One of my employees wrote to her in private messages. We laughed about it. I trusted her. This guy didn't stand a chance. I went to bed to get ready for work that night. The next day, she behaved strangely, changed the access code on the phone. I waited while our daughter was playing with the phone and asked her to let Dad look at Mom's phone. Mom turned out to be a terrible liar. A part of me died that day. I'm not perfect. I know that I have my mistakes and shortcomings, but I didn't deserve this. Story 13. My brother suspected absolutely nothing. He logged into his phone carrier account to look for the lost number. The bill was divided into 2 parts, his numbers and her numbers. He noticed that he had 365 messages in a month, and she had 9,000. He printed out the bill and found all the numbers on the internet. Some of the numbers were nothing, and some belonged to guys she worked with. He bluffed and told her that he had printed out all the messages. Her reaction was priceless. P.S. I can't believe this has become so popular. It's really sad that so many people can relate to this. This happened almost 10 years ago, when phone bills were completely different. As far as I remember, he suspected absolutely nothing. I apologize for the word bluff. Apparently I used it incorrectly. He printed out the text message numbers rather than the messages themselves because he couldn't access them, but he didn't let her know that. He told her that he had access to the messages themselves, even though he didn't. I hope I'm explaining correctly. Story 14. She left Facebook open on the computer. I came in after a night shift and saw their correspondence. Sorry you had to leave, but he was supposed to be home soon. I can't wait to spend the night with you again. A nervous breakdown ensued. Story 15. She said she was looking after her cousin's 2 children. I was working late, but I took 2 pizzas and stopped by her place, only to find out that she wasn't there. I tried to call, but didn't receive an answer. I went to see her father, but she wasn't there either. Then I decided to go to a friend so that he could help me find her, and I found them both together. It turned out that she had been cheating on me for several months, despite my proposal and engagement ring. This was the beginning of a dark period in my life. Fortunately, everything has changed now. Story 16. My story probably overshadows many others, and I probably should be telling it from a fake account, but here it is. My wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was hospitalized for tests to determine how advanced it was. I took time off during the busiest season at work and sat next to her the entire time. The doctor came to take her to the MRI. She tried to take her phone with her, but the doctor said that it was prohibited. The panic on her face told me almost everything I needed to know. She didn't have time to delete anything, so she tried to just put the phone in her bag. I took her phone and opened it to see what she was doing while I was sitting next to her. I didn't have to search long. Everything was black and white in the lewd messages. When she came back, I talked to her about it and she admitted it. But I said now is not the time to deal with it. We'll talk about it when she gets out of the hospital. She died 2 days later. I never received any closure, and her lover had the audacity to come to the funeral service, knowing that she was married. It's been 10 years, so it's just part of my past, but it took a long time to get over it. Story 17. My ex-partner wanted to show me photos from a concert she had just returned from. One of the photos was of a guy she was dating behind my back. Story 18:1. I decided to surprise her at a dance bar, although I told her that I wouldn't come because I tore my ligament at work that day. Found her in the toilet having sex with my former best friend. We were together for 7 years and got engaged. 2. I was delivering packages in her area and wanted to stop by for a visit, but she said she was not at home. I saw a strange car near her house. Later that day, she saw the same car again. It was her ex, whom she described as abusive and controlling. Apparently not bad enough to stop contacting him. We were together for 7 months. 3. Been through this before and noticed changes in her behavior. He started digging and caught her in place. She reacted by attacking me with a knife, and I still have a scar on my leg. We were together for 4 months. Story 19. In 2012, I found out that my ex was cheating on me thanks to Skype. Remember Skype, right? He had this messenger open on the large screen of his laptop, and I saw a message from a girl with whom I went to college and with whom he often worked in the theater. This message was sent the night before while I was sleeping. I thought about it for a couple of days until he left his phone on the table and went upstairs to take a nap. What I found on his phone. Wow. There were new messages from other women he knew before our relationship. I went upstairs, turned on the bedroom light, showed him my phone with a photo of this girl completely naked and said, "Wow, she's cute." Threw the phone at him and started packing my things. Story 20. I was sitting on the toilet playing Sudoku on her iPad. She said she was meeting a friend for pie, and I didn't suspect anything. But while I was playing, she started receiving messages from her real partner. I never clicked through her messages. Everything just kept popping up on the top of the iPad screen. Story 21. One day, a rumor spread that my aunt was cheating on her husband because someone saw her twin sister, my mom, having dinner with my dad. Story 22. She left her Facebook open, and their private messages made it clear that he was not just a colleague as she claimed. Story 23. I took his phone number to see if he was really trying to find a job. Found a hidden dating app that he must have been using all day while I was working hard to provide for us. Story 24. There were signs before the big incident. Our friend sent me Snapchat messages between her and another guy. She said that the woman who sent the messages made it all up. We agreed that she would delete Snapchat. I had to change jobs and was transferred to the night shift. This job was making me miserable, so I found a day job. When we were on the same schedule again, she became different, alienated. She said she was stressed, so I took care of the kids while she had fun with her friends from the mom support group. The day everything fell apart, I finally convinced her to come to my brother's for game night. She accidentally drank too much and went to the basement to lie down. A few minutes later, I went down to check on her. Her phone buzzed with a Snapchat notification. I read the messages in the last 24 hours and realized that she was probably dropping the kids off at her mom's and inviting her boyfriend of 2 years over to our house while I was at work. They commented on my weight. While I was figuring it out, I learned that she used money from my 401k to buy a new car for herself and all of our savings, about $30,000 to help her boyfriend open a gym. I tried to shoot myself, but the gun jammed in my mouth. I took this as a sign from above that I needed to leave and get my life in order. Story 25. He asked me to select a movie on his laptop. I went to the folder called Videos instead of the one called Movies, and I found a folder there full of videos of him and other girls. Story 26. I had my suspicions, so I bought a voice recorder. This was in 1998, and left it under the bed while I went to watch a football game with a friend. When I returned home after the game, I listened to the recording. Heard my wife having sex with another man in our bed. Story 27. So I found out that I was a spare. I met a girl at a bar and we spent the night together. They exchanged numbers, flirted sometimes, but she made it clear that she was not ready for a relationship, and I was not ready either. We just flirted and dated whenever she wanted. A few months later, her boyfriend, whom she was living with, called me. I had no idea he even existed. Eventually, he calmed down and we met at the bar. I told him what happened. He was just devastated. He eventually left her. The apartment was in his name, so she had to move out. She called me to confess everything. I said I already know. She said it was good because now we could be together. I replied that there was no chance since I could never trust her. I'm still friends with her ex. Story 28. I gave her a birthday dinner and she decided to invite the person she cheated on me with to this dinner. Needless to say, everything became painfully obvious 8 years down the drain. Story the 29th of December 25, 1602. She was at the beach to unwind after a stressful week. I was with my son and 3 of his friends who decided to stay overnight. I started watching the movie on our shared iPad with her Apple ID, and then the iMessages started coming. Happy holidays to me. Story 30. My 4-year-old son asked me if we were going to his house for dinner today. To a man I'd never heard of, but it turns out my son was there last night with my partner. Of course, she didn't tell me anything about this. At that moment, my heart sank. I immediately understood what was happening. Story 31. My then husband and I slept together naked in our bed while our friend slept upstairs. Then I heard her moans, but my husband was not in bed. I ran upstairs and found what I expected to find. Both this husband and my girlfriend are no longer in my life. Story 32. Her ex was from her hometown, and around the holidays, she would get very nervous, start obsessing over what he posted on Facebook, etc. It finally dawned on me when I asked her if she had feelings for him, and she exploded in a defensive rage. Then, I understood everything. Story 33. We were lying in bed and she thought I was asleep, but I turned over to her, trying to sleep, and she held the phone in the air, sending messages, lying on her side, facing away from me. I saw a message come on my phone. I love you too. So she said at first. A few nights later, when she was fast asleep drunk, I checked her phone. Wrong, I know, but it proved me right. And sure enough, she was planning on getting back with her ex. It turned out that not only had she lied to me about a lot of things, but she had never stopped having sex with him after they broke up almost 6 years ago. Additionally, I found out that she also cheated on me with her ex-boss. The messages between her and the others were so disgusting. Story 34. She received a Snapchat message from the guy she cheated on me with while her phone was between us. From that moment on, everything went wrong. 2 years down the drain. Story 35. She ambushed me at her session with a psychologist. I planned everything together with the therapist. I went there thinking it was something completely different and began to wonder why the psychologist was asking me if I was violent and asking me to sign a disclaimer. I looked at my girlfriend and she was crying and I thought, this is not good. Then she said she cheated on me 3 times. I was like Tom Cruise in Mission. Impossible when he realizes it's a hunt for a mole. He got up, said that it was all over, and immediately went and got checked. I haven't spoken to her since then. Update. This was both the best and worst day of my life. Update. To be clear, I'm not so much outraged by the ambush. I would have preferred another way, but she's had bad boys in her past, so I completely understand the need for a safe space. But it was very unpleasant. Update. For those debating why I called it an ambush. The reason I went to the session was because she wanted to show me the progress she had made with the psychologist. She went to these sessions to deal with some things from her past and asked me to come to be part of her progress. I remember she was very happy and smiling. She asked me a week before the meeting so I could clear my schedule. It was during the day and I work full-time. That's why I called it an ambush. If she had said, hey, there are some issues we need to discuss, that would be a different matter. But no, it's an ambush. Story 36. Everything was fine for about a year. Then he started working long hours around the same time I saw the name Anna on his phone. I saved my number under the name Anna in his phone and deleted mine. I then wrote to him on her behalf, inviting him to come. I followed him to her house. She wasn't at home. He called Anna, but I answered the phone. I watched as he tried to figure out what was happening and how I was on the phone. He was so confused that he couldn't think of anything to say. He was exposed. I left him that same day. Story 37. One day, her best friend called because they had a fight and told her everything. Another time, I contracted chlamydia while being completely monogamous. Another time, a girl bought one of those phone screens that hides content while we were together, which made me suspicious. I looked over her shoulder when she was drunk and careless. And another time, some guy called me and told me to leave his girlfriend alone. Who was his girlfriend? Same as mine. Story 38. She had to work on Saturday, so I decided to surprise her and take her to lunch. I walked into her office and found her on her knees with her mouth full of her boss's dick. That was the end of it, and petty revenge began. Her boss and his wife were our friends. We often spent time together. I told his wife what I had stumbled upon, and she kicked him out too. A few months later, she wrote to me that she needed a wedding companion. The reception was at a hotel, and she had a room for the night. It's a little unclear how the plan came together, but we decided to take a photo of her while she was giving me a blowjob and send the photo to both of us. Story 39. Her phone was connected to Apple TV. Her Instagram messages were accidentally opened. The last message looked suspicious. I didn't say anything, and later decided to go through her phone. I don't usually do this and don't encourage it, but at this point, I'm 1/1 in favor of being right to do it. Story 40. Small changes in her behavior. The last time we had sex, she was very distant and didn't want to look at me, which was completely the opposite of our usual sexual behavior. A quiet conversation on the phone with her mother on Mother's Day, on which I usually also spoke with my mother-in-law, but this time I did not. She made several large purchases without discussing them with me. She turned off Find Friends on her phone. She suddenly started spending a lot of time ignoring me, etc., so I asked her, and from her frightened behavior I realized that she had done something terrible. Story 41. I took her phone when she passed out drunk, trying to find her friend at the Atlantic City casino. At this time, messages from another guy began to arrive. Story 42. When he was arrested for trying to use the services of prostitutes, I finally realized that he was cheating. I suspected this for years. He gave me an STI when we were married and trying to get pregnant, but he convinced me it was my fault. We went to couples therapy because, of course, all our problems were because of me, and he did not think it necessary to mention that he cheated with prostitutes. Helpful tip. When two different marriage therapists contact you personally and tell you that your husband is a sociopath, believe them. Story 43. Not with me, but my sister suspected that her husband was cheating. She hired a private detective and found out that he had a separate house with another man. He turned out to be gay. 20 years have passed since then, but the whole family is still psychologically traumatized. Story 44. My husband was driving and talking to a friend on speakerphone in the car about cheating on me. At the same time, our little one was sitting in the back seat and filming a video on his iPad. A few months later, I accidentally found this video on my iPad. I'm still very shocked by this. Story 45. At my last interview for a police position, the detective doing my background check found this out while investigating my ex-wife. Story 46. I suspected, but didn't know for sure. One day she came home and I put on Shaggy's "It Wasn't Me" and pointed at her. She had a look of complete shock on her face. I understood everything immediately. Story 47. My ex had a lot of hickeys on his neck and claimed his dad threw erasers at him. It turned out that he had 4 more mistresses in different cities. Story 48. The guy forgot that he was logged into Instagram on my phone. The night before I left for Navy training, we had a big family dinner. The guy was chatting with some random dude. He asked my husband if he could meet him, and my husband replied, "Yes, my husband is leaving tomorrow, so we can meet after." As you can imagine, leaving for the Navy with such pain in your heart and knots in your stomach. You wouldn't wish that on anyone. Story 49. He behaved suspiciously with messages, turned around so that I could not see what he was doing. The phone was always face down. The password changed every few days. Eventually, I was able to access his phone while he was sleeping and discovered that he was texting sexually with 2 different girls, one of whom was engaged. She sent him some pretty explicit photos, so I took a photo of them with my phone and sent it to her fiancé. Unsurprisingly, they broke up soon after, but I foolishly stayed with him for another 9 years before finally kicking him out. Story 50. He touched my hair differently, as if it were shorter and not curly. A few days later, he suggested going to dinner with his friend. I agreed and said we could invite his other friend from work. He made a slight movement with his mouth, as if he was uncomfortable and was trying to hide it. Then I asked, in an innocent tone, who she was dating. He became nervous and hesitated. That night, for the first time in our 12-year relationship, I checked his phone. I just knew where to look. In correspondence with her, there were phrases such as, "I don't want to lose what we have." Then I looked in his photo album, in the basket. He thought he was smart. I took pictures of all this. We finished in 10 days, after I had sorted out all the logistics of the breakup and returning to my home country. Story 51. She confessed to me the next day, crying. It was hard, but I forgave her. A week later, she did the same. It was even harder, but I had no self-esteem and I forgave her again. After a week or two, she left me because she found out that I had student debt, which was never a secret, and she definitely knew about it. She did me a favor. It was a very toxic relationship, and even though I've been single for almost 20 years since then, I prefer that over spending any more time with her. Story 52. There was a change in atmosphere. The intimacy felt like strangers trying to find comfort together on a first date. Suddenly, random quarrels became vital to our stability. One day, I walked in and saw her clearly taking nude photos that I never received. I never knew for sure. We broke up for other reasons, but I'm almost sure. Story 53. She often stayed late with colleagues, which was normal at first. We met while working as waiters 9 years ago, and going to bars with colleagues after work was a common thing for us. But then we were 19 years old, and now we are already 26, 27. I moved to a 9-5 job, but she still worked in restaurants. This time she was gone until almost 2:30 a.m. without explanation. I called, and wrote again. I was worried that she might drink and end up in jail, or worse, harm herself or others. I checked her Find iPhone and saw that she was in some house. I wrote and called again. He even wrote, "Why are you at this address?" At 3 o'clock to 3:30 a.m., she finally started to move. I texted and called again, asking why she wasn't answering. Just tell me what was going on. She then parked in the Walmart parking lot. I wrote again, "Why are you parking at Walmart? It's almost 4 a.m. Come home." When she arrived home, I went out to the parking lot of our house, where she was making out with some guy in his car, in our parking space. After I told her for the last 2 hours that I was tracking her location. You should have seen her face when I knocked on the window and told her to get out of the car. The fastest way to end an almost 10-year relationship. Story 54. Found flirting messages on her Snapchat. A few days later, I returned home after the concert. She was not at home. I looked at her DVR and saw that it was deliberately turned off the night she left the house while I was at the concert. Finally, he pulled the truth out of her. I broke down. She tried to console me. I told her to leave, found the phone number on my phone bill, did a reverse lookup on the number, used the name to get the address on the Ben-verified website. The next morning I went there and found her car there. Totally rude. Story 55. She disappeared and left her 6-year-old son with me for several months while she did drugs and slept with a coworker. It took several months to find her and find out what happened. I hope the baby is okay. I hope not with her. Story 56. Not with me, but my cousin and his wife had problems in their marriage for a long time. One day, her phone was lying on the table, and he accidentally saw a notification about a message from another man. He asked her, and she burst into tears. It turned out that she was having an affair with a guy she met at a work event. Cheating was the last straw in their marriage. In a crazy turn of events, she ended up marrying the guy she cheated with. She gave birth to his child, and they seemed to be happy. She and my cousin now maintain a good relationship for the sake of their twins, even though things weren't pretty for a long time. Story 57. I found out my ex cheated on me with a city bike when I went on my first date after kicking him out a few months later. My date and I asked each other the standard questions to get to know each other better, and he said my story was very familiar to him, and he was able to give me details about things we shouldn't have known. We agreed that he knew my ex, and they went on a trip together. They met when my ex was leaving his sister's bedroom doing the walk of shame. This was in March. We broke up in June because he became aggressive with my son. I didn't know he was having fun on the side. As I mentioned, my date's sister was a city biker, his words. She claimed that she and her husband had an open relationship, but her husband clearly did not know this. When we signed the separation agreement and there were witnesses present, and this is the important part here, he mentioned that he wanted to change the agreement so that I would pay him child support. I told him he could try, but I wouldn't give up without a fight. He asked what I meant. I stated, in the presence of both witnesses, that I knew about his infidelities and I had evidence. He tried to deny it, but when I mentioned my date's name, he flew into a rage, signed the papers, and stormed out of the room, leaving his mother, whom he brought as a witness, completely stunned. So I guess it was some kind of revenge too? Story 58. The police called to see if I knew where he was. His employer asked to check on his condition because he did not show up for work. He left me a note on the kitchen table. At that time, I was visiting my parents in another state. On a whim, I called the office of the woman he had mentioned earlier and asked if she knew where he was. She replied, "Yes, he is with me. You two need to talk." No joke, bitch. Naturally, we got divorced. Story 59. After he broke up with me, I made him sleep on the couch. I realized that he had left his wallet and keys in the bedside table, and he had to get up at 4:30 in the morning for work, and I did not want him to come into the room. I opened the top drawer of his nightstand and found love letters from her. Then I got upset and decided to look in his wallet, and there were photos of them together. I had no idea he cheated before we broke up, and he didn't mention it as a reason. Story 60. She was charging her phone while she was dozing and I was working. She didn't work, but I worked as hard as I could. I saw that she was constantly getting notifications on Snapchat, and I had her PIN code. I opened the application and saw the saved correspondence, where she wrote how she hated me and wanted to build a life with this man. I pretended to be her and asked him for a video call. He was delighted, saw me, and immediately hung up. I woke her up and told her everything I thought. Our 1-year-old was also dozing at this time. Story 61. I needed aspirin and reached into her purse, she told me herself. Under the pills, I found a note from some guy about how they should be together all the time. And then all the little things that I ignored as paranoia were confirmed. I felt like I had been shot. Story 62. She just told me. We were arguing a lot, and she said that she wanted to take a break. And I immediately went on Tinder and met guys, as well as a colleague. Yes, it bothered me until I slept with a girl while we were on break, and she freaked out. Anyway, I hope she's doing better now. Story 63. One night, an attractive girl knocked on the door, handed me a business card for an Indian restaurant nearby, said something cryptic about my wife, and asked me to meet her there, then left. Intrigued, I met her a few minutes later at the designated location, and she handed me a folder containing printouts of dirty messages and photos between her husband and my wife of 17 years. It turned out that her husband confessed to her out of guilt, and she found me through social networks to tell me what they had done. Turns out my wife has done this to about a dozen guys over the last year. We have 3 children. I showed her the door. Story 64. Not with me, but my friend suspected cheating and checked her phone at night. He found photos she had sent to another guy and messages about dating, even though she claimed she wasn't dating the guy. He talked to her close friend, and she confirmed that his wife, now ex, was in love with another guy, and their relationship was over. Story 65. Not with me, but with my friend. Story. When I was younger, I had a friend with benefits, FWB. We were both bisexual. He had a daddy, an older guy he was dating. And then one day, to his surprise, this daddy turned out to be a real dad. They were doing this when the guy's wife came home early. My friend had no idea he was married. The wife, in turn, also did not know that her husband was bi-gay. The most amazing thing happened a few days later, when the wife invited both of them to a conversation. To paraphrase, she said that since she clearly couldn't satisfy her husband's needs on the homosexual side of things, she was fine with them continuing. Her only condition was, I never want to see that again. Haha. I still communicate with my friend. They still meet sometimes. Story 66. He was showing me something on his phone, and he got a Snapchat notification from a girl he cheated with in a previous relationship. She was also his brother's ex. I've never seen anyone remove a notification so quickly. Story 67. I found out that my ex was cheating on me when I decided to surprise her one evening with roses after her class. Sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes waiting for her to come out, watched as she walked out holding hands with her boyfriend, kissed him passionately, and then got into her car. I walked up to her car with a big smile on my face, gave her roses and said, I loved you, and then walked away. Story 68. I had a feeling that something bad was happening, although there was no real reason for it. Later that night, it turned out that her bachelorette party was actually a trip to some guys when I saw her friends on Facebook, but my ex wasn't tagged with them. I sent them a message asking if my ex was okay, and they said they never made an appointment with her. Story 69. I couldn't remember my Facebook Messenger login, so I entered my phone number. It turned out that he was linked to a fake account that my husband used to cheat. All this happened while I was pregnant, and our daughter was fighting for her life in the hospital. And one more time, our neighbor's husband came and told me that my husband was sleeping with his wife because my husband did not give him marijuana and money so that he would remain silent about it. Story 70. He woke me up at 3 a.m., told me he didn't love me anymore, and left. The next day, my mistress called me at work and said that they were planning to move in together after she left her partner. Story 71. Opened our laptop and her Gmail automatically loaded. Saw a text message between her and her ex where they discussed meeting when she goes to her hometown next month. Story 72. She was at a party I wasn't at. No big deal. I heard from people who were at the party that she was having an affair with the owner of the house. I asked her about it, and she categorically denied any foul play. In desperation, I lied about cheating on her, which led her to admit that he actually dipped her donut that night. Story 73. I was with her for about 4 years, madly in love. Until now, I had never felt such an instant, wild and desperate attraction for someone as I did for her. In the year before I found out about her infidelity, she began accusing me of cheating. I went to my high school reunion, but she didn't go because she was on a business trip to Chicago. At the meeting, I talked to my high school girlfriend, who was married and brought her husband with her. We talked for about 15, 20 minutes, and someone took a photo of us, which they then posted on the event page on Facebook. No flirting, not even touching each other. They just sat next to each other and smiled. This quarrel lasted a week. Then one night she saw a message from a woman who worked for me on my phone screen. She reported that she would not come to work the next day due to an urgent matter. My girlfriend asked if this was my mistress. Apparently, in her opinion, I looked guilty because checks notes. Answered too quickly. I showed her the message and told her that this woman was married and old enough to be my mother, but she didn't listen. Idiotically, I didn't even think that she could be projecting her guilt onto me. I was just playing the role of a patient, comically tormented guy. So how did I know? The good old way. I caught them. My job sent me to a 3-day conference in Palm Springs. On the first day, our seminar leader broke his leg on the golf course. We were given a choice: stay or spend the next 2 days at the company's expense. I decided to book a flight back home and surprise my girlfriend. I arrived home around 9 p.m. I took a taxi which dropped me off at the very entrance. This was the clincher. We were renting an old house that was set up so that the living room was at the back of the house. The front door opened into the formal living room and dining room, which you had to walk through to get to the living room. If I had arrived by car, I would have entered through the garage at the back of the house, close to the living room, and they would have heard the garage door going up and would have had time to escape. So I walked in through the front door, and the first thing I heard was the sound of pornography coming from the living room. My girlfriend loved pornography, and I thought, great time! Caught her playing with herself. This will probably lead to great sex. From the dark dining room, I could look across the kitchen and see my girlfriend, completely naked, with her breasts bouncing, sitting in a strange reverse position in my leather chair. I couldn't see what was underneath because the kitchen counters blocked my view. I remember thinking, damn, she's really having a blast when she masturbates, but she doesn't even look at porn. It was only when I approached the kitchen doorway that I saw the whole picture. There she was, completely naked, her back turned to me, having sex with another guy. I stood in the dark kitchen for a moment, my heart breaking into small pieces, not having the slightest idea what to do. The guy's head popped over her shoulder, which instinctively made me take a step back, as if I was doing something wrong. And he pulled her towards him and said, I think I saw something move in your kitchen. Her answer completely broke me. Ha ha, you're paranoid, honey. I told you he left before Friday. Honey is her nickname for me. Until that moment, I thought that it belonged only to me. I stepped towards the door and turned on the kitchen light. I said something to announce my presence. I don't remember what. I played this moment in my head so many times. I hope it was something cool or witty like, evening canceled, or look who came home early. But to be honest, it was probably something like, and now I'm home and I see you're cheating. I'm never cool in important moments. She jumped off him and ran into the bedroom, where she locked herself. The guy started getting dressed and getting his things together, but he did it strangely slowly until I screamed, Are you walking for time thinking I'll leave so you can finish? Get out of my house! He raised his hands and said he wasn't looking for trouble, but he didn't know where his car keys were. So, in one of the most surreal moments of my life, I was helping a guy I caught with my girlfriend look for his keys so he could leave. As we did this, I realized that I knew who this guy was, the boyfriend of one of her close friends. Oh damn, you're Angela's boyfriend, aren't you? Who? Angela, one of Katie's best friends. I met you at the house we all rented in Austin on ACL. Listen, dude, I'm begging you, buddy. It was a mistake. It didn't happen often. But please don't tell Angela about this. Oh, I'll tell her as soon as you leave. Please, dude, please don't. I will do it. Nothing will stop me. It's gonna break her heart. Bro code, human. Get out of my house. The next week was ugly and difficult. The lease was in my name, so she had to move out. Her friends had almost completely turned their backs on her. That week, I received a lot of messages from her friends telling me I was a great guy and praising me for telling Angela about her boyfriend's infidelity. I didn't really care about Angela. She was mean and petty and always treated me like something she just scraped off the bottom of her shoe. No, I just wanted to hurt Katie the way she hurt me. I wanted to wreak havoc in her life, just as she had done to mine. As Katie was coping with this, she received news of her father's death. Aneurysm. I just collapsed dead in my soul. She had to leave for the funeral. Her sister sent me a message, angry at me for not going to the funeral to support her sister. When I explained what happened, she called me and apologized. Katie's family adored me, and I did them too. Losing them was a big blow, and I wanted them to know it wasn't my fault. Kathy returned from the funeral expecting me to relent. Instead, she found all her belongings packed and ready to move. One day, about a week after she returned from her father's funeral, I came home and all her things were put away. She left her house key along with a long letter that barely fit into the envelope. I put the key away and burned the letter on my barbecue without reading it. I blocked her on every possible communication platform and haven't heard or seen anything from her since. Story 74. I've told this several times, but this is one of the most significant parts of my life. I spent 5 years with a girl I moved in with and helped improve her life. We met through friends, started talking, and started dating a month later. We were happy and always supported each other until one day we decided to move in together. At that time, she dropped out of school and was barely holding down a job at a restaurant. I had a lot of savings, and I suggested that she go back to school, go to college, and then see what happens. She agreed, quit her job, went to school, and graduated in a year. She wanted to become a veterinarian, and I supported her. I once met a client who said he made a lot of money as a nurse, and it helped him become financially stable. My girlfriend was very worried about money since I had been supporting her for over a year, and I told her about being a nurse. She was delighted. 2 years passed, and she was now working in a large hospital in a nearby town. She was happy, healthy, and no longer worried about money like she used to be. The first hints of her betrayal were long nights. Nights when I worked 8 hours and then came back to an empty house until 11 p.m. She used to say that there weren't enough nurses and she had to stay until help arrived. I didn't care considering she always looked tired when she came home. But gradually her face stopped expressing fatigue, and she began to come home in ordinary clothes and smelling of coffee. I asked her how her day was, and she looked at me as if I was interrogating her and said, "Oh, as usual, short-staffed and all." The next week, I went to her work to bring her food from the food truck and wanted to ask if she wanted to take advantage of the discount on theme park tickets I could buy that day. Her colleagues said that she would not return until after lunch. The strange thing was that she told me that her lunch was at 2 p.m., and I was there at 1:30. I texted her and asked if she wanted the food I bought, and she again said lunch was at 2 o'clock. I asked her colleagues, and they said, "Oh, right, at 2, I forgot." I shrugged, thinking it was a small thing. I received a final warning when I came in for the third time, and one of her colleagues told me to ask her about different hours. I thought it was about the watch I gave her, but I waited until I saw her later and asked about it. She started crying, saying that everything happened too fast, and she didn't know how to respond, showing me another watch that her work boyfriend bought. It turned out that when she first made friends with her colleagues, they invited her to become the working girlfriend of one of the doctors, since she liked him. She met him to tell him off, but he offered to buy her lunch and took her to a place that cost $300 per person. This guy was a trust fund kid. His parents paid for everything. Attractive 26-year-old guy who was paid by his parents to live a luxurious life while he worked to become a surgeon. Every day he was with her, he bought her something new and shiny. Watches, clothes, bag, little things here and there. She explained that she wanted to tell me, but she was afraid that I would explode and hurt him. This made me angry. She cared more about his feelings than mine. I said I can't do this anymore. That's all. She didn't care about how I felt, and only him. Told her to pack her things and get out. She cried for hours, saying that she would break up with him and that it was a mistake. I said that I would no longer be her support if someone else had already taken that position. I left the apartment and returned to my parents for the weekend, expecting her to accept what was happening. My mom said a few words to her. My dad ignored her, pretending she didn't exist. She finally changed her attitude, as if bragging about this guy who cared about her was going to help me change my mind. I just sent a policeman with some movers the next month to move her things and send her to her parents. In the end, I was left with an empty feeling and an empty apartment. I spent about 6 months there before I left. The only answer I got from her was 4 years later, when she said she had a baby and cancer, and she wanted me to take care of her baby because her work boyfriend was no longer taking care of her when she got pregnant. 3 years have passed since then, and I can't say that I feel anything for her again. And I can't say that I feel anything for her again. And I can't say that I feel anything for her again.